Welcome to Fear Spiral. Rain tapped against the cracked windows of Alden's dolls and dreams, a sound like tiny, insistent fingers. Inside, the air was thick with a scent of old wood and dust. Hundreds of dolls filled the shelves, their glass eyes catching the dim light, each one staring, each one unnervingly lifelike. In the heart of this silent audience, Mr. Alden, the town's forgotten dollmaker, hunched over his workbench. A single flickering lamp cast long, dancing shadows across his face, carving deep lines of obsession into his features. His hands, gnarled and trembling, moved with a strange, practiced grace, carving something delicate from a block of pale wooded doll unlike any other he had ever made. He worked in a feverish trance, his breath catching in his throat. He whispered to the half-formed figure, his voice a ragged, desperate tremor that barely disturbed the quiet. Just one last soul, and it will be perfect. He was so close, he could feel it, the culmination of a lifetime's work, a masterpiece of wood and something more. Suddenly, a brilliant flash of lightning tore through the darkness outside, illuminating the entire workshop for a split second. Every doll's face was thrown into stark, horrifying relief. In that blinding, silent moment, a new sound entered the room. It wasn't the rain, and it wasn't the creak of the old building. It was a voice, a whisper, soft and chillingly close, seeming to come from the very shadows themselves. It was almost human, yet carried an ancient coldness. "She's waiting." Mr. Alden froze, the carving tool slipping from his grasp. His head snapped up, eyes wide with a mix of terror and ecstatic recognition. He scanned the rows of silent, watching dolls. The voice hadn't come from them. It came from the new one, the one on his workbench. A slow, terrible smile spread across his lips. The final piece was falling into place. The next morning, the village was quiet, but Alden's workshop remained shuttered. No one saw him leave, not for his morning bread, not for a stroll by the creek. The neighbors, when asked, exchanged uneasy glances. They'd heard hammering all night, a frantic, desperate rhythm that echoed through the cobblestone streets. But that wasn't all. Beneath the metallic clanging, they heard something else. Laughter, a low, guttural chuckle that didn't sound like Alden at all. As evening shadows stretched long and thin, his young apprentice, Clara, grew worried. She hadn't heard from him all day. With a heavy heart, she made her way to the workshop. The air was cold, and a strange silence had fallen over the street. She pushed the heavy oak door. It didn't budge. She pushed harder, and it groaned open with a chilling creak that seemed to echo in her bones. The scene inside froze her in place. Every doll in the workshop, dozens of them lining the shelves from floor to ceiling, was turned away from the door. Their painted eyes were all fixed on a single point, the workbench at the far end of the room. And there, hunched over his latest creation, stood Alden. His back was to her, his shoulders slumped in a way she'd never seen before. He was muttering to himself, his voice a hoarse whisper. Clara took a hesitant step forward. "Master Alden," she called out, her voice barely a tremor. He didn't turn. "She's almost alive, Clara," he rasped, his voice filled with a disturbing mix of glee and madness. Almost he finally straightened up, revealing the new doll. It was unlike anything he'd ever made. Her porcelain face was half-finished, a grotesque blend of smooth, painted ceramic and raw, splintered wood. No, not wood. It was flesh. A sickeningly pale, human-like texture. Clara's eyes widened in horror, a scream caught in her throat. She stared at the doll's face, at the single, unfinished eye socket. And deep within that dark void, something glimmered in the faint candlelight. It wasn't the smooth, reflective surface of glass. It was wet, veined, and unmistakably human. 2 days passed, then 3, a week. Alden's shop remained a dark, silent fixture on the corner of the street, its windows like vacant eyes. The closed sign swung gently in the autumn breeze, a constant, mocking reminder of his absence. I tried calling, texting, even knocking on the door of his apartment above the shop. Nothing. It was like he had vanished into thin air, leaving behind only the lingering scent of wood polish and an unsettling quiet. My concern grew with each passing day, twisting into a knot of dread in my stomach. Something was wrong. Terribly wrong. Finally, I couldn't stand it anymore. I found the spare key he'd given me ages ago, tucked away in a dusty drawer. My fingers trembled as I slid it into the lock. The click echoed unnaturally loud in the silence. Pushing the door open, a wave of stale, cold air washed over me. The familiar warmth of the shop was gone, replaced by a chilling stillness. The air was thick, heavy, as if holding its breath. My gaze swept across the room, and my heart hammered against my ribs. Everything was wrong. The once charming clutter of dolls was gone. Instead, they were arranged on the floor in a perfect, meticulous circle. Dozens of them, their painted eyes all staring inward. And in the very center of this silent congregation sat the unfinished doll, its smooth, featureless face turned towards the ceiling. It looked like the centerpiece of some strange, forgotten ritual. Lying beside it was a small, black object I didn't recognize at first. A digital voice recorder. With a shaking hand, I picked it up and pressed play. Static hissed from the tiny speaker. Then a voice, Alden's voice. But it was a mere whisper, strained and laced with a terror I'd never heard before. "Clara, if you're hearing this, I'm sorry. I couldn't stop it. The doll, she's not just wood and paint, she's something else, if she speaks. Whatever you do, don't answer her." The recording clicked off, leaving an even more profound silence in its wake. My blood ran cold. I stood frozen, the recorder clutched in my hand, my mind reeling. What did he mean? Don't answer. Just then, a sound brushed against the edge of my hearing, so faint I almost missed it. A whisper, like the rustling of dry leaves, coming from right behind me. "Clara, will you help me finish?" Time seemed to slow down. Every muscle in my body screamed at me to run, but I was paralyzed, rooted to the spot. I didn't dare turn around. I didn't have to. From the corner of my eye, I saw movement. In the center of the circle, the unfinished doll's head was turning. Slowly, deliberately, its smooth, blank face swiveling to look directly at me. The whisper came again, closer this time, right next to my ear. "I've been waiting for you." The air in Alden's workshop was thick and still, smelling of dust, varnish, and something else. Something faintly metallic and sweet. I'd always been fascinated by his creations, these perfect porcelain figures that lined the shelves. Each one a masterpiece of delicate artistry. He called them his children, and I, his devoted apprentice, had spent years learning his craft. But tonight, a new doll stood on the central workbench, shrouded under a velvet cloth. Alden was gone, but he'd left a note for me, his final lesson. With a trembling hand, I lifted the cloth. My breath caught in my throat. This doll was different. Clara, he had named her in his notes. She was exquisite, life-sized, with hair like spun moonlight and a dress the color of a twilight sky. But, as I stepped closer, a chilling detail came into focus. The doll's face, it looked wrong. One half was the flawless, smooth porcelain I knew so well, painted with a gentle blush. The other half was something else entirely. It was a mosaic of pale, soft tissue, pulsing with a faint, rhythmic light, almost like living skin. My gaze was drawn to her eyes, or rather, her eye. One was a beautiful, painted glass orb, serene and lifeless, but the other rolled in its socket, wet and alive, fixing its gaze directly on me. A single pearlescent tear traced a path down the living side of her cheek. My heart hammered against my ribs. This wasn't just craftsmanship, it was something forbidden, something that defied nature. On the table next to a collection of strange, surgical-looking tools, lay a note scrawled in Alden's familiar, elegant handwriting. It read, "To complete her, she needs a heart." Suddenly, the single bare bulb hanging overhead flickered violently, casting the room in a strobe of light and shadow. A low guttural creak echoed from the walls. I spun around. The other dolls, the dozens of them lining the shelves, had all turned their heads. Their painted glass eyes, once staring blankly forward, were now all fixed on me. They weren't just looking, they were watching, waiting. It was as if they understood the note's terrifying implication. They understood what must come next to bring their new sister to life. And in their silent, unified stare, I felt the crushing weight of Alden's final, horrifying request. The sobs were so faint, I almost missed them, a ghostly whisper beneath the clatter of my own thoughts. They drew me to the old workbench in the corner of the dusty workshop, a place I hadn't touched since Alden, since he left. My fingers traced the worn wood, searching for the source. That's when I felt it, a subtle seam, a hidden finger pull. I tugged, and a section of the floor groaned open, revealing a trapdoor. Stairs, slick with something I didn't want to name, plunged into a suffocating darkness. A chill crept up my spine, but the sobs, now a little clearer, compelled me downward. The air grew thick and cold, heavy with the cloying, chemical scent of formaldehyde and the unmistakable stench of rot. It was a smell that coated the back of my throat, a smell of secrets better left buried. My phone's flashlight cut a nervous beam through the gloom, landing on rows and rows of shelves lining the damp stone walls. On the shelves were jars, countless glass jars, and inside each one something floated. My breath hitched. My hand flew to my mouth to stifle a scream. Eyes, milky and vacant, stared out from their liquid prisons. Severed fingers, pale and wrinkled, pointed at nothing, and hearts, suspended in the murky fluid, looked as though they might still beat. This was Alden's real work, his collection. In the center of this grotesque museum stood a single, ornate, full-length mirror. Its silver frame was tarnished, but the glass was impossibly clear. As I approached, a knot of dread tightening in my stomach, I saw a reflection, but it wasn't mine. It was Alden, his familiar face, pale and ethereal, stared back at me from within the glass. His voice was a rustle of dead leaves, echoing in my mind more than my ears. "Finish what I started, Clara," he whispered, his eyes locking onto mine. "She's waiting for you." Then, the reflection of my long-lost brother smiled, a cold, knowing curve of his lips. The sobs from below had stopped. A new sound began, a soft, rhythmic scratching from somewhere deeper in the dark. I stood frozen, staring at his smiling face in the mirror, but I wasn't smiling back. When Clara returned to the attic room, a chill snaked up her spine that had nothing to do with the autumn draft. The small porcelain doll she'd been restoring was gone from its velvet chair. That was strange enough, but what made her blood run cold was the sight of every other doll in the room. Dozens of them, their glassy eyes all fixed on the tall, ornate mirror standing in the corner. Their heads had all turned, as if watching a silent play. Clara took a hesitant step forward, her heart pounding a frantic rhythm against her ribs. That's when she heard it, a soft, raspy sound, like air being forced through dry leaves. Breathing. It wasn't coming from behind her or from the shadows clinging to the rafters. It was coming from inside the mirror. She crept closer, her own reflection staring back at her, wide-eyed and pale. Then, a shape distorted the image. A small hand, pale and childlike, pressed against the other side of the glass. The fingers were smudged with something dark. Before Clara could scream, the glass seemed to ripple like water. A second later, the doll she had been looking for stepped right out of the mirror. It moved with a grotesque, unnatural grace. Its joints cracked and popped with every step, a sound like dry twigs snapping underfoot. It stood before her, no taller than her knee, its painted smile looking more like a grimace. Blood, thick and dark, dripped from the corner of its porcelain mouth, staining the delicate white lace of its dress a deep, horrifying crimson. The doll tilted its head, the cracking sound sickeningly loud in the silent room. A voice, ancient and brittle, scraped from its throat, a whisper that filled the entire space. "You promised," it rasped, the words dripping with a century of bitterness. "You promised to finish me." Clara finally found her voice and screamed, a sound swallowed by the suffocating silence of the attic, trapped with the thing that had stepped out of the glass. The crisp morning air carried a chill that had nothing to do with the weather. The door to Alden's doll shop, the gilded cage, was ajar, swinging gently in the breeze. It was an invitation, but one nobody wanted to accept. Sheriff Miller pushed it open, the little bell above tinkling, a sound far too cheerful for the scene inside. The shop was eerily quiet. Rows upon rows of dolls stared back with their glassy, unblinking eyes. Alden, the reclusive dollmaker, was gone. So was Clara, the town's sweetheart who had last been seen heading this way, drawn by the promise of a doll made in her perfect image. There were no signs of a struggle, no overturned furniture, just a thick, suffocating silence. Sheriff Miller walked down an aisle, his boots echoing on the old floorboards. He felt 1,000 pairs of eyes on him, their painted smiles seeming to widen as he passed. He'd always found this place unsettling, but today was different. Something was profoundly wrong. He looked closer at a doll with familiar blonde curls. Its porcelain face, it looked just like little Susie from the bakery, but with a vacant, trapped expression. He moved to the next, a doll with a faint freckle pattern he recognized from the postman's son. A cold dread began to crawl up his spine. He scanned the shelves, and with each doll he saw, the horror mounted. It was as if the faces of the town's children had been meticulously, impossibly, molded onto these porcelain bodies. They were all here, captured in silent, glassy perfection. His gaze fell upon Alden's workbench. Amidst the clutter of tools, paints, and delicate limbs lay a single, unfinished doll. It was breathtakingly beautiful, its features a perfect replica of the missing Clara. As the sheriff reached out, his hand trembling, the doll's eyelids, painted shut just moments before, fluttered open. Its crystal blue eyes focused on him. A tiny, porcelain mouth curved into a serene smile, and a voice, ethereal and chillingly sweet, whispered from its lips. "You made me perfect." A scream tore from the sheriff's throat, a raw, primal sound of pure terror, but it never left the room. The silence of the shop, thick and heavy like a shroud, simply swallowed it whole. That night, the familiar glow from Alden's workshop cut through the darkness once more. A flicker, then a steady light, just like any other evening, but this evening was different. Through the frosted glass of the window, a silhouette moved. It was a man's shape, unmistakably Alden. I almost called out to him, but something stopped me. A chill that had nothing to do with the night air. The figure stepped closer to the window and I saw his face. It was Alden, yes, but not the Alden I knew. His eyes, usually sparkling with passion and creative fire, were hollow voids. They stared right through the world, fixed on some unseen, terrible horizon. His movements were wrong too. Stiff, deliberate, like a puppet mimicking its master. It was as if he'd become one of his own creations, a man made of wood and wire instead of flesh and blood. A whisper escaped his lips, a sound so faint it was nearly lost to the wind, yet it carried to me with perfect, horrifying clarity. Perfection, he rasped, his voice a dry rustle of leaves, requires sacrifice. My heart hammered against my ribs. Sacrifice. What had he sacrificed? His sleep, his sanity. And then, I saw it. I saw her asterisk, standing beside him, where before there had only been an empty space, was the doll. But she wasn't the small, porcelain figure I remembered. She was taller now, her form elongated, almost reaching Alden's shoulder. Her painted hair was gone, replaced by strands of long black hair that cascaded down her back like a silken shroud. She turned her head, just slightly, and her glass eyes caught the lamplight. She looked human, almost. The way she walked, with a newfound grace that mirrored Alden's stiffness, was a horrifying dance. It was then I understood. The perfection he whispered about wasn't in the doll. It was the doll becoming perfect asterisk through asterisk him. He wasn't just the creator anymore. He was the material. Weeks turned into a chilling eternity in our small, isolated village. At first, it was just a whisper, a strange unease that hung in the air like a thick fog. Then, Old Man Hemlock vanished. He was a fixture, always tending his garden. One morning, his garden was overgrown, his cottage empty. The only trace of him was a new doll in the old dusty workshop window at the edge of town. It was him, perfectly replicated in miniature, from the worn tweed of his cap to the slight stoop in his shoulders. The disappearances became a grim drumbeat. A week later, young Eliza, who sold flowers at the market, was gone. And there she was, a new addition to the macabre display. A tiny porcelain figure with her bright red scarf and a basket of impossibly detailed flowers. Panic started to curdle into sheer terror. The village, once a close-knit community, became a collection of locked doors and fearful glances. We stopped gathering at the pub, stopped letting our children play in the streets. The silence was deafening, broken only by the wind rattling the workshop's window pane, where the doll population grew with each passing week. A dreadful legend, once a campfire story to scare children, resurfaced with venomous new meaning. The elders spoke it in hushed, trembling tones. The Dollmaker's curse. They said if you dream of her, the porcelain woman with the tilting head, she marks you. If you dream of her walking through the cobbled streets, her joints clicking like a marionette's, she knows your name. And if you dream of her standing at the foot of your bed, her painted eyes staring into yours, she'll come for you next. Her visit is the final seal. The next morning, you're just another perfect, lifeless doll, staring out at a world you no longer belong to. Modern technology was meant to be our shield, our way of fighting back against the shadows. We set up security cameras, hoping to catch a glimpse of a human perpetrator, something logical we could fight. But what we saw only deepened our horror. The grainy footage showed something, not quite human. Late at night, a figure would glide past the homes of the soon-to-be missing. It was a woman, her skin gleaming like polished porcelain under the moonlight. She moved with an unnatural grace, her head tilting at an impossible, broken angle, like a puppet whose strings had been snapped. She never touched a door, never broke a window. She just passed by. And by dawn, another soul was gone, another doll added to the silent, watching collection. Last night, I had a dream. I was walking down the main street, but it was empty, shrouded in mist. Then I heard it, a soft, rhythmic clicking sound. From the fog, she emerged. The porcelain woman, her painted smile was fixed, her glass eyes empty but somehow focused on me. She tilted her head, that sickening familiar snap of a broken toy, and I woke up screaming, drenched in sweat. I've barricaded my door, I've nailed my windows shut, but I know it's useless. I can hear a faint clicking sound outside, getting closer. She's here. I don't know how much time I have left, but please, if you're watching this, whatever you do, don't fall asleep. Don't let yourself dream of her. The old doll shop had been a town landmark for as long as anyone could remember. Old Mr. Fitzwilliam, the dollmaker, was a craftsman of a bygone era. His hands, gnarled and stained with varnish, could bring porcelain to life. He worked tirelessly, chasing an impossible ideal he called perfection. He'd spend weeks on a single doll, painting and repainting the lips, resetting the glass eyes, all in pursuit of a flawless creation. Yet, he was never satisfied. He would often be heard muttering to himself, "Not quite right, not yet perfect." His obsession grew, and soon, the laughter that once filled his workshop faded into a heavy, focused silence. He became a recluse, seen only through the dusty panes of his shop window, a hunched figure surrounded by his silent, porcelain children. One day, the shop didn't open. Days turned into weeks. The townspeople whispered, wondering what had happened to the old dollmaker. When the authorities finally entered the shop, they found it empty, except for a thick layer of dust and one single, breathtakingly beautiful doll sitting on the main workbench. It was unlike anything Fitzwilliam had ever made before. Its skin was impossibly smooth, its eyes held a depth that seemed to see right through you, and its smile was hauntingly perfect. On a small plaque at its base, a single word was inscribed, Clara. The doll was a masterpiece, the embodiment of Fitzwilliam's lifelong quest. But of the old man himself, there was no trace. The shop was shuttered, and the mystery of his disappearance became a local legend. Years passed, and the story of the dollmaker and his perfect creation faded into folklore. Then, one morning, the town awoke to a surprising sight. The old shop was open again, its windows sparkling clean, a new bright sign hanging above the door, Clara's Creations. Curiosity buzzed through the streets. Inside, the shop was transformed. Hundreds of dolls, each one as eerily perfect as the original, lined the shelves from floor to ceiling. They all had the same flawless skin, the same knowing eyes, the same unsettling smile. And there, in the very center of the store, on a velvet pedestal, sat the first one, Clara, the doll that had started it all. A new inscription had been added to her base, carved in neat, elegant handwriting. Perfection is eternal. As the last customer left for the night and the lights were dimmed, a strange thing happened. Clara's glass eyes seemed to shift, just a fraction, scanning the rows of her silent sisters. A faint, sibilant whisper, like the rustle of silk, slithered through the darkness, filling the room with a chilling promise. Your turn. Thanks for watching. Like, subscribe, comment, and share. It really helps me out.